Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're looking at Wasteland, number 10 through 12, continuing our scholarly examination of this terrific anthology comic from the late 80s, published by DC Comics, which makes it even more bizarre because it's still hard to believe that DC published this stuff. The art, the writing does not fit in with anything DC has ever published, probably. Let's start with number 10 here. I think I told you last time, George Freeman has left the collective, the four artists who have drawn every issue on a rotating basis. And so they have a guest artist this time, Timothy Truman, of, Grimjack and Scout fame, many other things. Timothy Truman is, God, he's got an oeuvre. But it's cover by Don Simpson. I love this cover. Can you imagine this? This is like before Vertigo. This is a DC comic, and this is the cover. This crazy, obviously, trying to duplicate what a child would draw. This Sally's picture, third grade. And, she the teacher was probably like, draw your family. And this is what little Sally draws. It's this fucking horror show. Lawyers are showing up, police officers. The father has a gun in his hand. The mother and the father are trying to stab each other with bloody knives. It's just oh God. This is more horrifying than any EC horror comic, like Tales from the Crypt. Just because this happens every day. There's kids. This is their life. This is a pretty amazing cover. I love it. Also, just the style. Doing this as a cover of a comic from DC, that's pretty fucking daring. So we start off with the first story. It's called How the Unborn Child Avenged Its Mother. It's actually adapted from an African folktale. And it's written by John Ostrander solo, no Del Close. And this is Timothy Truman doing his first contribution to Wasteland. This is a really creepy story. So apparently, there's this time of famine in Africa. This little olden times, time of folklore and myth. People are starving. So we see this couple, a husband and a wife. The wife is pregnant. They're traveling to the wife's mother's house, the husband's mother-in-law, to get some food. I mean, that's how desperate everyone is. They might have some food. Let's go see if they'll feed us. They pass a giant fruit tree. And the husband says, wife, climb up that tree and shake down the fruit. And she's like, I'm pregnant. I don't know if I should climb the tree. So he's like, fine, then don't. But eat none of my fruit. Sounds like a real dick, this guy. They're both starving. It's like, this fruit's mine if you're not going to shake it down. So he does, and she collects it for him. She has a bowl, and she's collecting all the fruit. And the husband sees her and yells down, don't eat the fruit. I shook it down. It's mine. And she says, rightfully so, she says, I haven't eaten any. I was only picking it up for you. And the husband says, you lie. And he throws a spear right at her. He murders her. It looks like it's right in her belly, too. She's pregnant. So the man eats the fruit. And he continues to journey to the mother-in-law's house. It's a long journey, so it's more than a day's journey, so he falls asleep that night. And this is so creepy. the baby, his unborn infant, shows up and says, "Father, where are you? Where's my mother, dead in the grave? I am your child, the unborn, undying. Wait for me, Father, I come." And this is like, I gotta say, that's fucking scary as hell. This is scarier than an EC horror comic. This undead infant following his father. He's gonna get revenge, I guess. So the father runs away, and he keeps running, and the baby keeps showing up. This baby's just crawling, but it's still keeping pace with him. "Father, where are you? Where is my mother? Dead in the grave." So finally he stops running and he realizes it's either me or him. I gotta kill that baby. And the baby shows up again, and he lies in wait for him. And when he spears the baby, and then he throws this giant rock down on him, crushes him. So he's like, "Okay, I took care of that." So the man continued on his way to his mother-in-law's hut. They greet him there, and the mother-in-law says, "Where's my daughter?" And he lies and says, "I left her at home. Her time of birthing is near. I came to beg for some food." They took him in and gave him food. They're having a great time. The brother-in-laws are laughing, joking with him. And then the baby shows up again. "Wait for me, Father, I come." And the mother-in-law realizes, she's like, "It calls you Father. Where's my daughter? You've killed her. It is better we kill you." And then all their brothers-in-law stab him with, it looks like, a lot of knives. And this is weird because this zombie child was cleansed and given to one of the son's wives to raise. The man's body was cast out onto the road. Oh man, that's so creepy. That's just the way Tim Truman draws that little devil baby. It's so scary. Here we have The Dreamer in the Darkness. And this is Del Close. And John Ostrander looks like kind of transcribed it for him. This is a weird little interesting vignette. It's 1936, and it's H.P. Lovecraft and his wife. And he's basically dismissing her. Basically saying, "I'm leaving you. We're done. I'm not divorcing you, but I just don't want to go back to Chicago with you. I want to stay in Providence, Rhode Island." That was H.P. Lovecraft's, home. And she's like, he calls her Miss Green, and she's like, "Miss Green, I'm your wife. Howard, take me back." She's pleading with him, and he's really cold and kind of harsh. Kind of basically says, "Yeah, I kind of stayed with you out of pity. I don't really love you." And she's crying. It's not a good thing. So she runs off crying. And then one of his few friends, Frank Belknap Long, he was another writer. And if you're into Lovecraft, he wrote in the same style. I think he wrote for Weird Tales, the same pulp that H.P. Lovecraft wrote for. And they were pals. And he calls him into his chamber, and he basically admits to him. He says, basically, there's one monster in my life. I write about monsters all the time, but my monster is syphilis. He got it from his father. His father was a philanderer. So he was born with syphilis, probably going to die from it. And kind kind of admits to Frank Belknap Long that all that Cthulhu stuff, it's all based on my syphilis. It's my huge fear, this huge monster in my life. I don't want to die like my dad did. Insane, blathering, drooling, psycho. But it turns out H.P. Lovecraft is kind of happy. He's like, I just found news that I won't have to die from syphilis. I'm dying of cancer. Huzzah, he says. So before he can die of syphilis, he's going to die of cancer. And he's kind of thrilled. He's like, wow, I beat syphilis by getting cancer. We see like a little time passes, maybe a year. He's in the hospital and he's close to death. And he's just thrilled that he's in Providence. Like, not only was it his hometown, he had this spiritual connection to this town. Almost all of a lot of his stories took place there. He says, Providence, I am it, and it is I. I am Providence. And he dies happy because he's in Providence. This is an odd one. Life's Illusion. This is Del Close and John Ostrander. Artist and colorist, David Lloyd, once again. And this guy's walking home from work. He's kind of happy. It's meatloaf night. It's favorite night of the week. And he looks up in the sky and he sees this crack. It's kind of subtle. This crack in the sky. And he's like, what the hell did I just see? I think I need a drink. I'm going to go to the local bar before I go home. And then we see these almost like godlike imps. And it turns out they're the ones who have to create reality. They're like construction workers. And we see the foreman. He's like, what the shit? This guy always walks home. Now we have to make a bar setting. So it's almost like they're directors or, on a film crew. Like anytime anyone does anything, supposedly, these guys have to make it. So they're like, okay, guys, get me a bar scene. Couple of barflies, the bartender, whatever. And so Marty's Pub shows up. You can tell they're rushed because even there you see 42nd Street is reversed. So they're not perfect. They're just workers. And they're rushed, so there's going to be some flaws. So he goes in and talks to the bartender. And I love this, how behind the wall we can see these little impish guys creating reality, working their hardest to make everything realistic. And they do a pretty good job. But as he's leaving, he looks at one of these barfly women and he sees her reflection in the mirror. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of tiny. It's kind of horrifying, though. She's got no face. And he's like, oh, man, my brain's coming unglued. I got to get home. And the foreman's furious. He's like, the next tech that sends an incomplete Atmobot to a hot set is going to suck vacuum. And the workers are like, you got to give us more notice, boss. You barely gave us any notice. Now we see the main character's wife at home. She's with her baby, their baby, and she's burping him, and his face falls off. He's one of those Atmobots. That must be just horrifying if that happened to your baby. She's like, ah! We see the husband walking home, and they're building reality as he's walking home. They're tearing down the old sets when he passes the house. building up new ones. Excuse me. When he gets home, his wife is very odd. She says, "The scales have fallen from my eyes. You're not my husband. You're a filthy simulacrum." He's like, "Mary, no." And she blows him away. But he's not a simulacrum. He's one of the real people. He bleeds. And she says, "Oh no, he was real." And she turns the gun on herself. And she's not real. We see like these cogs and sprockets come out of her brain when she shoots it. There's some nice David Lloyd art. I like that. And then we're back with the imps. And the foreman, of course, is furious. And they're all like, we got to start all over. Really weird story. That seems like the kind of story, like, if you were on a bad LSD trip, that would be the worst thing to read ever. Like, oh yeah, reality's all an illusion. It's not real. So we, number 11, they still haven't gotten a regular fourth artist to replace George Freeman. So they still have another guest artist here. Oh man, this first story is harsh. It's called Embryo. John Ostrander solo again. I guess the close was maybe a little busier in these later issues. He wasn't contributing as much. And this is artist and colorist David Lloyd again. We see this guy at his father's deathbed. He's not long for this world. And then we see flashbacks of what this father was like. And oh my God, this guy is like the biggest piece of shit ever as a father. He's cheats on his wife. He's cruel. He's petty. He's narcissistic. He's this like one of the shittiest dads ever. We see another flashback a little later when they're older, when the protagonist is like a young man and his sister's a young woman. And she's like, "Why do you still hang out with our father? He's horrible. He's a piece of shit." And he's just, he doesn't have any, he's just like, whatever, stop being so bitter. And he's like, "Our father raped me when I was 13. And he continued to do so until I ran away when I was 16. And the brother says, I didn't believe it when you first said it, and I don't believe it now." And she's like, "Forget me then. Look what he did to your marriage." And I guess the father totally ruined his marriage, his son's marriage. Just complete turd. But the son still goes to visit him, even before he was sick. He still has him part of his life. Everyone else in the family's written him off. I mean, he's a horrible person. But then we see one more flashback, and this is pretty illuminating. The protagonist is like a teenager, and it's like one of the few times the father did something fatherly with him. He takes him fishing. And the kid asks him, "Dad, do you love me?" Of course, the father says, "What the hell kind of question is that?" And the father says, "Do you love me?" And the son says, "I guess." The father says, "Do you like me?" And look at that. Man, David Lloyd captures that pensive expression on his face. I mean, like, what kind of expression do you have if your father asks you that question? I don't know. But it seems right. It's good stuff. And the son says, "Sometimes." And the father basically says, "But I'm here, right? I keep you fed. I keep you clothed. I'm here." My dad, I never had that. My dad wasn't even around. It's more than I got. So that's how the father justifies his cruelty, I guess. Just like, hey, I stuck around. Like, give me a fucking medal. So now we come back to the present, and the son says, all my life I've been waiting for you to die so I could be born. I'm the world's oldest embryo, Dad. He's like, I can't wait any longer. And he takes the pillow and stuffs his father so he can finally live. That's a pretty harsh story, and you can totally see how John Ostrander comes from the theater, because that it reads like some great monologue, you know, a great short play. The dialogue's all spot on. Here we have another Del Close autobiographical tale, transcribed by John Ostrander, basically putting it in the comic form, and cartooned by Don Simpson. There's some nice Don Simpson cartooning. Revenge of the Swamp Creature. This is a tale of when he was working on that Blob movie. I think we already saw one of the stories where he got this bit part in the Blob movie. Because I don't think Del Close had much success as an actor. He just has all these bit parts here and there. This guy in the film crew, this old guy, kind of befriends him, starts chatting with him. And they kind of have this pretty strong bond right off the bat. Because I guess this guy's got the sight. He's what was that, like in the Shining movie? He's got the shine. He's like, I could tell there was something weird about you. I could see your pentagram under your Catholic priest garb. He wears a pentagram, Del Close. Del Close was a practitioner of magic. I don't know if you could say he was a Satanist, but I think he might have been. And I guess these guys have such a bond that Del Close admits to him that he wants to murder these two lady cops in Chicago because he had a partner. He has it at the time. He has a partner who was jailed and brutalized by these two really bad cops, and he wants to kill him. He's obsessed with it. So the old guy says, "Hey, I know someone who could help you out." And he gives her a card. Sorry, he gives him a card. And the next day, he takes him out on a swamp boat, out to the swamps. And he takes Del to see Big Mama. She's basically a voodoo priestess. And this beautiful young woman turns out to be Big Mama. And he tells her his problem. And she's basically like, I don't think we have to kill them. That's not necessary. So she basically says, do you have any information about them so I could do a reading? And he says, yeah, I have their names and their badge numbers. She says, that's as good as a snip of hair. Give them to me. And she reads it when she gets the badge numbers. And she basically like kind of predicts their future or whatever. She says, I see people hating them. I see them hating themselves and taking it out on other people. I see them in pain, contemptible, unloved, disgraced, and dying young. And then she says, is that good enough for you? And Del says, that'll do. And I love this how she says, save your magic for healing, my son. Destiny will take your revenge. You don't need to help it at all. So you don't need to kill these people. Their own sad fate, destiny. You know, it's the best revenge. And so Dell bids farewell to her and the old man. And he asks the old man, he says, how old is Big Mama anyway? And he says, 20 or so. Dell says, really? And the old man says, been 20 as long as I can remember, too. So maybe she does really have witchy powers, you know. Oh, so here we have our guest artist, Ty Templeton. I don't know if you guys know Ty Templeton. He was kind of made a career out of doing like superhero cartoon adaptations in the style of the cartoons, like, you know, Batman the Animated Series. Then when DC did a comic of that, he'd be the artist they'd go to. At Image, there was the Wildcat Adventures based on the cartoon. He would do it because he was an amazing cartoonist, but he also had this perfect kid-like cartoony style. But he's really good too. I mean, he started off at Vortex Comics doing Stig's Inferno, like a pretty serious, good indie comic. But I guess he realized his niche. He has this really nice cartoony style, which is kind of great that he's in Wasteland. So this story is called Dissecting Mr. Fleming, written by the two authors. And this kid is in a school gymnasium, and his father has just got done dissecting the science teacher. Apparently, the science teacher, like this happens probably every year in a school, some kid doesn't want to dissect the frog, like this kid, and he kind of forced him to. So he was a little traumatized. When he came home, told his parents, and the father's solution was like, oh my God, how dare this guy traumatize my child? And he dissects him. It's horrifying. He's not repentant at all. He's just like, oh, this son of a bitch. I can't believe he traumatized my son. He got what he deserved. And as we see them converse, we realize the child, the son, is almost like the smarter one of the relationship, or at least the less unhinged one. Like he tells his father, you're a murderer now, Dad. What are you going to do? He's like actually thinking about consequences. The father is just like, wow, I did a great job. We see a flashback to the incident. And, of course, the kid, who's the more mature one, says, you know, Dad, some people might say you overreacted. And the father doesn't like that. He totally thinks in his brain that he did the right thing. So the son says, Dad, I see a couple of possible options here. We can turn you in and plead insanity. And the father's like, I'm not insane. So you'd fry. Option 2, suicide. And the son even offers to slice his throat for him. And he says, option 3, we could just walk away from this. We could just go home and see what happens. You didn't leave any prints, did you? And his father's like, no, I wear gloves, so sure. There's nothing connecting us to this crime. So they go home. And then son, who's the narrator, says, you know, yeah, nothing ever happened. We never got caught. Time passed. It got so Dad and I could joke about it after a while. Call it our little secret. It brought us closer together. This is so weird. Crazy. Okay, number 12. We have a nice David Lloyd cover. A little ironic commentary. And this is interesting. We have a sequel to a story that was in an earlier Wasteland. It's After the Dead Detective. I don't know if you remember an episode or two ago, The Dead Detective. Great story. Once again, written by John Ostrander, solo, and artist letterer Bill Mesner-Loebs. This time he gets an art assist from John A. Peck. And you know, guys, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. The last cover was by William Mesner-Loebs and John A. Peck, art assist. I forgot to mention that. So once again, the dead detective is in his office. He's still dead. And he's trying to remember how he died. And all he can remember is this, the last second of his life when the bullet comes through the door and hits him in the head. So he vows to find his murderer. It's like, I gotta do something about it. But I guess his building is condemned for destruction. This wrecking ball hits right then. I love this panel. He goes flying out the window and lands on the street. But in his mind, he's like, I hit the street. Like he does literally, but. So he figures that a murderer always returns to the scene of the crime. Well, not always, but usually. So he's in this dumpster waiting for the murderer to come back to his office. After 3 days, though, there's some guy running from the law, some robber, some scofflaw, and he's shooting, and he shoots a cop. And as he runs away down the alley, he says, "Hold this for me, will you, buddy?" And puts it in the dead detective's hand. Of course, dead detective says, I'm beginning to get a bad feeling about this. So, yep, as you can imagine, we see dead detective all gussied up in court. He's on trial for murder of a cop. His lawyer, tries to help him out, get his defense, but he can't talk. He's the dead detective. He's a dead guy who still has mental faculties. Can't move, can't talk. So the judge condemns him to jail. He's guilty. His first day in jail, he meets Mustafa, the King Khan of this cell block. And it doesn't look promising. He's got all these hearts every time he talks to him. He's like, hello. He says, you is mine. And dead detective was like, oh, jeez. Oh, my God. I forgot about this. So Mustafa has his way with the dead detective, consummates their new friendship. And he's thrilled. Mustafa's just like, that was terrific. Really, it was. You want a cig? So even as a dead guy, he's a pretty good lay. So I guess Mustafa has like a harem of lady men in the prison, and they're all jealous and like, oh, why are you fucking with this new guy? We're not good enough for you. And he's like, you're not with him at all. Basically he's his new favorite. So this huge brawl starts, and then it turns into a riot. When everything's calmed down, dead detective has to go to the lecture chair. And he's kind of happy. He's like, there's 3 options that can happen. They're all good. The juice will revivify me so I can actually move and talk again. Or it'll kill me real good, and I won't be stuck in this body thinking anymore. And hell, if it only makes people realize I'm dead, I figure I'm ahead of the game. So right when he's about to get fried, the lawyer runs in with a note from the governor. He's like, McCraw's innocent. A new witness stepped up. And the warden says, set him free, boys. And the whole time dead detective's thinking, you stupid motherfucker. I was so close. So he's set free. And we see him back at his office. And he's thinking, I don't get it, any of it. I thought they tore out my office. Who was the one-armed man? Did he kill me? And then the one-armed man walks in his office, throws a big wad of bills on his desk, and walks away. And dead detective says, this all has got to make sense eventually. Like, he's a true, like, puppet of fate. All this crazy shit happens. This is really interesting. The one-armed man, every panel, his arm changes. So it just kind of just ends on a surreal note. This next one is called Passing Grade. Once again, solo by John Ostrander. I don't know what's going on with Del Close. And cartoon by Don Simpson. We see the school, the Henson School for Gifted Youngsters. And this woman is at her job interview to be a teacher. And this Muppet-looking principal says, you know, kids today are more jaded than ever. You can't just be an educator. You have to be a world-class entertainer to keep their attention. Their attention spans are nil. And she's like, well, I'll do my best. I whistle a little. I play some guitar. So her interview, like, it's almost like a huge, like a talk show set. The school kids are in the audience. It's all very fancy. And these school kids, look at them. They're pretty jaded. So she starts trying to teach them stuff and realizes that the kids are just stony-faced looking at her. So she starts giving in and starts whistling, pulls out her guitar, starts really hamming it up. Totally puts on this zany outfit, is high-kicking, trying to teach the kids the math tables through this, you know, whatever, burlesque show. So the kids are not impressed. The principal fires her. And he storms off. But the teacher's just like, okay, you pampered poodles. It's back to basics. I'm going to motivate you with fear, and you'll learn, goddammit. So she basically takes the class hostage, and she's going to, like, teach them the way she learned at the Catholic school with those mean nuns. She's like, I'm not going to mollycoddle you fuckers. I'm going to force you to learn. So it turns into a huge situation. We see the news guys there, SWAT team. They say, what are your demands? She's like, up yours, copper. I got these kids, and I'm not letting them go until they learn something. And she's like, I'm going to make them take a standardized test. And surprisingly, we see this USA newspaper, a huge paper. It works. Student test scores rise dramatically. Educators hail teaching breakthrough. She's like the Time Woman of the Year. It's called Tempest. It seems like everyone loves her. It's working. But one day when she gets to school, she's now the superintendent of a whole system. Her secretary says, it's the 5th grade at Dewey School. They claim they now have nuclear capability. So the war between student and teachers has been upped. So here we see our new regular artist, and I don't know if new is the right word. He's old, twice as old as any other contributor here. the famous Joe Orlando, classic artist of EC Comics in the 60s, who becomes a great editor at DC Comics and pretty much didn't draw. Of course, famously, a few years before this, though, he drew some of those backups in The Watchmen. Alan Moore was like, hey, I have this fake EC pirate comic, and Joe Orlando's my boss. I'll get him to draw it. So it's pretty interesting that this late in life, such a weird comic, Joe Orlando would be all like, yeah, I barely draw any comics, but I'll become a regular on Wasteland. And I'm glad he did. So this one's called Titty Tat Breath. And this is another solo John Ostrander, unfortunately. I mean, it's pretty good, but I like when the two collaborate. We see this cat trying to get to this mouse, and he does. Kills the mouse and eats it. His owner, totally dotes on his pet, he's like, oh, you got titty tat breath. His partner, I don't know if it's his wife or just a girlfriend. They seem pretty close, though. And he's heading out to go to his job. And he's like, take care of the cat. Make sure he eats. And she's like, you care more about that cat than me. You pay more attention to him. I fucking hate that cat. So he leaves. And when he comes back later, she's got a nice banquet dinner for him. And he's chowing it down. He's loving it. And she admits to him that it's the cat. She cooked up the cat. She's sick of, playing second fiddle. And the guy goes berserk. Jumps across the table. And I don't think he meant to, but he kills her. It's like, what do I do with the body? This is very EC Comics. Instead of throwing them in garbage bags, taking the risk of someone discovering her, he eats her every night for the next few nights. He's disposing of the evidence slowly but surely. And we see the owner of the kitty cat, well, the ex-owner of the kitty cat. And on the news, the reporter is saying how a lion has escaped from the zoo. The guy is so sick of eating his wife's remains. He's like, I'm going out. I'm getting something good to eat. And as soon as he opens the door, the escaped tiger's there. And the tiger attacks him and just rips him to shreds. I love this. Joe Orlando must have been at least 60 by now. Just an old man with a nice comfy job at DC. He can still bring the gruesome. Look at this gnarliness. And the cops who show up to kill the tiger, they can smell his breath. So the tiger has titty tat breath now. The two zoo workers who collect the body are like, they're not in the up and up. They're like, hey, we can sell this to the black market beef guy who supplies meat to everyone at a great price. And we see this fast food restaurant with all these teenagers, and they're cooking up that, a rat swallowed by a cat, swallowed by a human, that human swallowed by another human, and then they're swallowed by a tiger. So it's quite a sumptuous hamburger. And that's the end of that. So there you have it, Wasteland number 10 through 12. I hope you enjoyed them. I I still, like I said, I love this anthology. Even the stories that aren't like total winners, they're definitely quirky and weird enough to be like, oh, I'm glad I read that. Like, Del Close and John Ostrander, both of them actually, because a lot of these are just solo John Ostrander, but I gotta say, I just love the way they write stories. There's not many writers who have their, I don't know, je ne sais quoi. There's lots of horror comics with short stories, even like adult ones, like the Undergrounds. But just the way these guys write, it's a very like dry, always with some humor, but sometimes it's pretty harsh, but it's in this dry way where it's just like, yeah, I wish I could describe it better, but just phenomenal writers. And I'll let you know that next time we're going to have, I think, another new artist, because after this issue, all the team's going to leave except for Donald Simpson. I mean, the writers are here for the whole thing, Del Close and John Ostrander. But the only one who stays on is Donald Simpson. And we've already met Joe Orlando, so we're going to be introduced to another regular artist. I'm sorry, two regular artists to be part of the team. So that's it. And I guess I got nothing more to say than I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.